For many firearms enthusiasts, this may be the first pistol that they ever owned, or perhaps even ever shot. You'd be forgiven if you called it a Luger. After all, they have a similar look and a similar name. The design was actually based on the Japanese Nambu pistol, which William Ruger acquired from a US Marine returning from overseas. Introduced as the Ruger Standard in 1949, retailing for a whopping $37.50 US, it was so successful the design spawned its own competitive following and is largely unchanged today. I'm talking about the real firearm, of course, but the same can be said about these two KJWs, the Mark I and the Mark II. They make reliable first pistols that have excellent accuracy and are something a little different than everything else on the field. Unfortunately, both the green gas and the CO2 option is about 400 feet per second and up, so unless you choose to run duster gas, these are for outdoors only. Now, these are not new pistols. Those who've been in the sport for a while will remember these from a while back. Now, KJW recently revived the designs, and I'm really glad to see it. Let's see if the very affordable Mark I and the newer metal Mark II is still relevant today. So why do I think it makes such a good first pistol? Well, for one, they're both non-blowbacks. This means there's no bolt or slide that moves around. This means less moving parts to fail, and this means ultimately less maintenance required as well. Of course, this means they don't have as much recoil, and the trigger pull is heavy and long. But for someone looking for that first pistol as a last-ditch backup, it more than does the job. Compared to other non-blowbacks on the market, it also has a longer barrel as well as an adjustable hop-up. This gives you accuracy comparable to much more expensive pistols. It's also a little bit quieter than other gas blowbacks, making it a really good backup for a sniper rifle. Starting with the packaging, it's pretty standard KJW with a photo of the gun on the front. They both have Zippo lighters on the front. I guess KJW thinks Ruger owners are smokers. Inside, it's styrofoam protection with a plastic bag around the gun. Standard box of BBs, and the Mark II comes with two Allen keys, one for the CO2 and one for the hop-up. Mark I owners will have to source their own Allen keys. Interesting how KJW puts a lot of effort into their catalog, but, well, a little less on the manual, especially the Mark I. This just looks dated. Internally, these two pistols are more or less identical. The Mark II is an improvement of the Mark I with a metal upper, fluted barrel, grip panels, and fiber optic sights. It also has a CO2 magazine versus the green gas one of the Mark I, but more on that later. For a first pistol, I definitely go with the Mark I, as you're getting the same internals for about half the price. Now, as a collector's piece, the Mark II does feel leagues ahead. And that brings us to build quality. Now, the Mark I is mostly made of plastic, but it is put together pretty well. I did notice some outer barrel play, but it's pretty easy to fix by tightening that barrel screw. They definitely could have done a better job with that fake bolt though, and when you give it the old shake test, you do hear quite a bit of that noise. The Mark II is a noticeable quality increase that's evident as soon as you pick it up. The front barrel was solid out of the box. They still didn't fix that fake bolt though, and now being made of metal, the noise is even more noticeable. I will say that the plastic lower completely fooled me. I totally thought it was metal until I took it apart. The finish is more of a matte as opposed to the semi-matte of the Mark I. Taking a look at the weight, the Mark I with the mag comes in at 545 grams, while the metal Mark II comes in at 787 grams. The real Rugers come in at about 1.3 kilograms, which is a lot more than I thought. A Glock 17 weighs about half of that. The Mark I sights are adjustable for windage and elevation, but are all black. The fiber optic sight on the Mark II is excellent to use, but the rear sight is only adjustable for windage. Ergonomically speaking, the grip is quite far canted forward, but is pretty comfortable to hold and doesn't take that much to get used to. The safety is pretty easy to activate with your right hand, but is not ambidextrous. The mag release is true to the Ruger and is located at the base of the gun. It's definitely not a one-handed operation, but it does hold in the mag pretty tight. The pistol field strips in a unique way, so let's go over the basics. First, drop the magazine like any other pistol. Then undo this latch and pivot the whole piece back. Pull straight down and the whole piece comes free. slide the whole upper forward and the entire unit pivots forward and off of the lower. You can then undo this Allen key, which releases the outer barrel and gives you access to the hop-up chamber. To put it all back together is a little trickier. Make sure the upper is together properly. It should look like this. Flip everything upside down, making sure the hammer is sticking straight down. Line up the 2 pins at the front into their proper slots, as well as the hammer into the fake bolt. It should take no effort to seat the upper back into position. Reinsert the pin, then pivot the entire piece so the little hammer piece falls inside. It might take a little bit of wiggling, but again, should take no effort. As far as maintenance goes, with so little high friction areas, you get away with maintaining it once or twice a season. But of course, take care of your mags as usual. And that brings us to magazines. Now, the Mark I magazine does fit into the Mark II, but the Mark II magazine has a base plate that won't let you put it into the Mark I. What this all means is that if you start off with the Mark I and build up a collection of magazines, you can easily swap them over to the Mark II if you like the platform. The mags are set to hold 17 rounds, but I'd load 16. 17 is pretty tight, and I did get some feeding issues. Non-blowbacks are well known to be powerful and efficient, so let's see how these guns do, starting with the Green Gas Mark I. Starting off at 400 feet per second, we can see the consistent nature of a good non-blowback. Every magazine is loaded to 15 rounds. Every time I pause to load the mag, you can see the FPS spike up a little as it warms up. Amazingly, it pumps out 84 shots, most of which are well over 300 feet per second. Moving on to the CO2 Mark II, it starts off a little spicier at about 430 feet per second. Again, we see excellent consistency as it goes through the magazines. I noticed cooldown had a smaller effect on the CO2 mag, and the velocity steadily drops as the CO2 canister runs dry. I was surprised that it only made it to 75 shots compared to 84 of the green gas, but of course it is shooting with a little more power. For outdoor gaming, the added power compared to gas blowbacks is excellent for running heavier ammo. I'd recommend 2/8 and up. Let's take a look at the trigger. They are identical on both models, so let's take a look at the Mark II. Take-up is 1 millimeter before the stiff travel begins. The tension ramps up through its 1 centimeter of travel until the break right at the end of travel. The break is rounded and not distinct, but once you get to know the trigger, the stiffness lets you know right where the break is. There is no over travel. Reset is all the way back where the tension begins, but at least it's a clean reset. Accuracy of the two pistols is definitely comparable to more expensive blowback pistols, and provided you don't rush the trigger, you can pull off some pretty good shots. If you take your time with the trigger, the break is actually easy to get used to. However, double taps are not this pistol's friend, and trying to shoot quickly will definitely throw off your aim. And there you have it, KJW's Mark I and Mark II. If you're looking for a secondary on a budget, the Mark I is quite an excellent option. And even the more expensive Mark II is still cheaper than most cast blowbacks. They're both relatively fuss-free and should prove reliable for years to come. As always, thanks for watching, subscribe for more content, and we'll catch you on the next one.